person, but people aren't growing up together in a way that's required.
Do you think because the city is getting bigger? Do you think it's just because of the politics? Do you think it's just this moment
Expense.
in time?
Well, I think expense is really the main driver.
Yeah.
I think expense is the main driver. And the reality is that poverty is concentrated among people who look a certain way. And doesn't mean the people who don't look that way aren't struggling too.
Absolutely.
But the likelihood of the mix, it's becoming more and more rare.
Yeah.
And that to me is scary. And so we're always trying to look at not just how do we speak about our mission. What we're finding now is our new challenge is how do we more aggressively share our mission? How do we make sure that New Yorkers understand that ending hunger in our city is a solution with them at the center of it?
Yeah.
You know, it's not something that's just a holiday thing. It has to be something that really, that they see themselves
agree.
in.
Well, one of the things that, for instance, I try to explain to my kids when we walk in areas and you see, the occasional homeless that is asking for money, or just somebody that is in need that is on the sidewalk. They're able to relate that with poverty. And my point to them is like, look, this is a side of poverty that is here because it's their choice. Please do realize that tonight there will be a kid that is sleeping somewhere, that is going to bed without a meal. And here in New York, we are where 1 in 4 kids that goes to bed hungry at night.
And in some communities, it's even higher.
Yeah.
In some communities.
And that's something that I never felt.
Yeah.
Like I felt hunger once in my life. I was camping.
Yeah.
And I had nothing. And it was a storm and I spent 3 days without eating. And eventually I went through a garbage to look for food. It's tough.
Yeah.
It is a place where you really consider a lot about yourself, about the world around you, about the blessings that you have by not having to worry in general about these things.
And really, like, for the kids who are growing up in poverty, I think that my biggest worry, and I think the thing that probably drives me the most, is making sure you don't ever want for a child who does not have the background that we have to believe that poverty and lack is some kind of birthright.
Right.
That they are simply not entitled to anything different from that. That
They
this
will
is
never
their
seek
lot
the
in life.
opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.
They
And
will
so,
take for granted that the opportunity is not there for them.
absolutely. So I think that when we look at our work at Food Bank, we just look at it with a totally different lens now. That it's not so much just about the food that comes off the truck. Obviously, that's always going to be most
Absolutely.
important. But we now look at where the trucks go and what are the characteristics of those communities. How ready and able are those communities to serve their neighbors? And what we found is that, hey, the poorest people in New York City now are also in the poorest communities because it's now dense.
Yeah.
And they're served by the poorest charities. And that our best opportunity to really see change is how do we focus on building the capacity and opportunities and access to those charities
Absolutely.
in those communities? How do we build that bridge, whether it is about having more volunteers and New Yorkers who live outside of that community to go there and have that exposure, to be able to highlight those charities so that they can meet new friends?
Absolutely.
Because what we find is, like, what I loved about what you were saying about how, if we had needed help, we go to the church. Well, guess what? That's still happening.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the churches are broke too.
Yeah.
Because they only serve poor parishioners.